Hey folks, welcome back. Time to continue our Halloween extravaganza with some more Call of Cthulhu stuff. This week we're looking at the Malleus Monstrorum slipcase set from Chaosium. You can see it's very impressive. It comes with two beautiful volumes. We have Volume 1, which is the Bestiary, and Volume 2, which focuses on the deities of the Mythos. You can see Volume 1, Volume 2 marked out there. On the front, we have the cover of the Monstrous volume. And on the rear, we have the cover of the Deities volume, which is quite terrifying looking. And of course, along the back, we have a lovely logo here in the classic kind of Romanesque font there, with what looks like a star spawn of Cthulhu over here, which is quite a nice little touch. And of course, the Chaosium logo. Now, this, of course, is an update for 7th edition of the previous Malleus Monstrorum, which came out in 2006. And for those of you who were around back then, I think it was for version 5.5 of Call of Cthulhu, perhaps, or maybe 6th, I can't remember which. But this was a paperback supplement that was extremely popular as it brought in monsters from all across the many years of Call of Cthulhu supplements up to that time, and adventures and scenarios and so forth. And it had a very interesting art style of these kind of reworkings of ancient drawings, engravings, and woodworkings and stuff to look like images of Lovecraftian creatures. So it felt like almost a archaeological study of these creatures and gave them kind of a situated feel. You won't find that in this volume, and in fact some have complained about a lack of art for some creatures in this volume, but I mean honestly there's so much art out there for Cthulhuid entities that, you know, you can always find something to show your players, so I don't consider that a big deal. And the art that is there is fantastic also. But as well, what you will find in here is a huge amount of extended, expanded, gameable content from that previous edition. So as you can see by the division up into two massive volumes, Chaosium has given us a heck of a lot more to work with as GMs. Entries have been expanded. The gods have been given a lot more interesting aspects rather than just simple stats. They have auras that affect the area around them. There's loads of interesting, cool stuff in here. And in the first volume as well, there's some fantastic tips for GMs about running monsters, creating monsters. So let's take a quick look through. I'm not going to go through every monster because we'd be here forever, but we'll flip through, and when we spot something famous or particularly interesting, we'll take a closer look. So this is Volume 1, Monsters of the Mythos, and you can see Mike Mason there. He's the line director and creative director for Call of Cthulhu 7th edition, and I do recommend as well, if you go to the Chaosium YouTube channel, his games that he has GM'd are really fantastic. He's clearly a long-term expert of the game and is really good at creating atmosphere, so do check those actual plays out on the Chaosium YouTube channel. One of them is a playtest campaign for The Dead Within, which is a forthcoming campaign for the game that is still being worked on, so do check that out if you get a chance. Of course, we've got not much, again, going on with the end papers in this, but we can skip past that. That's all right. So Volume 1, as suggested by the title, is all about monsters of the Mythos. So these are creatures that you will encounter. They're not gods. They may be extremely powerful and very deadly, and you may need to run away from them rather than even think about fighting them. But they are not great old ones or elder gods or anything like that you'll find in the second volume. They're of a lesser power level. They can be defeated, but sometimes you'll need to be quite creative in how you do so, because some of them can travel through space or time. Many of them are smarter, or at least as smart as humans, and will retreat when needed, or to regroup or rethink their approach to defeating you. They might not even attack you initially. They may just watch your behavior and respond accordingly. And in fact, quite a few of them have large collections of spells that they can use against you. And there's some advice in here about how to find appropriate spells for your monsters. So there's a wonderful introduction here that walks through the history of the volume, talking about the previous first edition of the Malleus Monstrorum in 2006, and how they've gone about extending that. So in this volume, there's about 150 entries all told, comprising a significant representation of otherworldly beings, monsters from folklore, and beasts to bring fear and madness to investigators of the unknown. So, along with the Lovecraftian entities, we also have more generic folkloric entities like vampires, werewolves, ghosts, etc. And we also have animals, and scary ones at that. Snakes, bears, that kind of stuff. As your investigators will often be hacking their way through jungles, or farting around in the Arctic or Antarctic or whatever, looking for ancient relics and artifacts, and so they may well encounter wild beasts alongside the disgusting creatures of the Mythos. And scouting throughout the volume, we have the journals of Sir Hanson Poplin, so he's offering some kind of in-character essays and speculative notes about the different creatures that you'll find. Chapter 1 is really of great value to the GM, so if you are going to be the keeper, I should say. If you are going to be the keeper for a Call of Cthulhu game, I highly recommend studying this chapter. They give you great tips on how to describe things that are supposedly undescribable, which includes a lot of aspects of the mythos. So, how do you get across the scariness of a dimensional shambler to your players? Well, how do you make the appearance of a Hound of Tindalos maximally impactful, And they recommend using descriptions based on sight, sound, smell, touch, even taste, or even what they call the sixth sense, which is just that kind of feeling of eeriness or impending doom that sometimes people get when things are about to go terribly wrong. But what they don't recommend is simply saying, there's 3 Migo in front of you, what are you going to do? Or here's a Hound of Tindalos, it's coming out of the corner of the room, what are you going to do? Make it always slightly mysterious what they're facing. It could be something they're familiar with. They may think it's a Hound of Tindalos, but there are also variants in this book, as you'll see, of many different types of classic monsters, so they could be quite varied in their capabilities because they give average stats for every monster listing, but also you can roll the stats up, and they give different die values to give appropriate ranges for the different key attributes for these monsters. So a Hound of Tindalos they face on one day may be different from when they face on another day, even if they are not different variants. They just could have one could be much stronger, one could be much faster, etc. There's great tips as well on playing monsters, especially reinforcing the idea that a lot of these creatures are very intelligent and they're operating on a level of action that is incomprehensible to the typical human. So we're never going to be able to fully understand what the great race of Yith is trying to do with their mind transference through time, or what the Migo want to do with their brain cylinder computers, or all that kind of stuff. So they should be weird, they should be reacting in unexpected ways, they should seem relatively unaffected by human suffering or our reactions, or may not seem to understand us, or they may just simply not care when we're present until we get involved or interfere. We also might take caution when making deals with entities like this, which may be we need to do to try and take on a larger threat, but they may have different conceptions about morality than we do. So using intelligent creatures that are powerful and have unknown technologies and magical powers and all the rest of it, use that to your advantage as a keeper to keep players on their toes, basically. Deals might be broken, they may turn on you when it suits them, all that sort of stuff. And they also mentioned that some entities that are not so smart, like Shoggoths, they should be terrifyingly unpredictable and just prone to raising hell, running around, swallowing things up, engulfing entire houses, whatever they need to do. And the players may need to be creative in how they deal with such entities because they're very resistant to damage, they have no way to be reasoned with, but they could be standing directly in your path to something very important. So use those monsters to give the players an interesting problem to solve. Talk about playing monsters effectively, and then how to run monster combat in an interesting way. So, even if you're using their standard attack over and over, describe it in different ways. It could be they're using a claw towards the face in one instant, in the next round they're swiping with a spiky elbow or reaching out with a lashing tongue. You may still be rolling the same dice, but the descriptions are varied, and also monsters tend to have multiple different ways of taking investigators out of the fight or making them less effective beyond just attacking. So make sure you use those. They may be able to disarm investigators, knock them down, grapple them and chuck them off a cliff, lots of different things. And they mention here the use of combat maneuvers, which are often advantageous, especially if the monster has a large build. The maximum build of a human is only 2, but there are monsters in here enormously bigger than that, which means that they could grab a human with a combat maneuver and have no hope of the human resisting. Use that effectively as well. Make the monsters thrilling and varied on the battlefield. Along with that, there's some interesting stuff about describing evidence left behind by the victims of Mythos monsters. So, when you describe the death of some NPC due to different kinds of creatures, it gives examples. If it was a dark young of Shub-Niggurath, you might say, it was as though someone, or thing, had punctured the flesh with dozens of spikes of varying size. Each wound was filled with black pus, making them look more like suppurating ulcers. Strange lash marks covered the body, as though he had been relentlessly whipped before whatever next had happened to the poor person. Again, don't use names of Lovecraftian entities to make it obvious. Describe the scene, the smells, the horror, the grossness of the death inflicted on these poor people. Give them some clues as to what may be causing it, but always leave that aspect of uncertainty. Make the players do the work of finding out what actually caused the death. And they give loads of great examples here, including stuff like fire vampires, ghouls, hounds of Tindalos, who leave behind this bright blue goo that has a strange vinegary scent. I mean, there's loads of interesting stuff that you can use in these notes to make your monsters exciting to fight and more terrifying to fight as well. And there's some key points here about monster magic. So as a general guideline, the higher a monster's POW and int, the more likely it is to know spells. As a guide, those with POW and int of 50 to 100 might know 1 to 6 spells. And when you're choosing spells, you should try to consider the purpose and nature of the creature. They give some examples here of typical combat spells, disguise spells, and generally useful stuff that monsters might use. And it gives you page references where relevant to the core rulebook in front of the slash and to the Grand Grimoire of Cthulhu Mythos Magic after the slash. And we'll cover that in a future video as well, by the way. That volume, I again highly suggest if you're going to really want to vary up your players' combat experiences, then grab that book of magic and use it to give lots of unexpected abilities to your creatures. And then they give some great guidelines here about creating monsters. So what's its inspiration? Is it related to an existing Mythos monster? Does it have unknown origins? Think about what its drives are. Does it just want to consume? Does it need to find some specific item or substance to live? Is it kind of an element or a thrall of a Mythos deity? How does it look like? Is it invisible? Can it change its shape? Is it much bigger or smaller than a man? What can it do to you in combat? And of course, you need to give it some limitations. Maybe they have a great deal of strength but are not so fast, or dexterous, so you can hit them very often, although perhaps not very effectively. And also think carefully about the number of attacks and damage that you give to each monster, because most human-like monsters will have one attack in a round. Typically, those will do a decent amount of damage, enough to inflict at least a major wound on a character if they get a decent roll. But not all of your investigators will be fighting types. Some of them will be academics or scholars or, focusing on magic, for example. So they won't be in there mixing it up with ghouls and serpent men and so on. So be careful about how many attacks you give to your creatures. The more that you give, ideally, you want to reduce the effects of that damage somewhat, reduce the size of that damage so that you don't have the possibility of several characters getting slain in a single round. They also give it a sort of basic guideline based on the size. So if a monster's size is 100 or less, bearing in mind that the average human is size 65, it should have 1 attack per round. 100 to 200 size, it should have 2 attacks. If 200 to 400, 3 attacks, and so on. If dex is lower than 50, then deduct one attack to a minimum of 1. Then again, we talk about spells and powers, so this is going to depend on whether you're using a more bestial monster that doesn't have a great deal of intelligence. They may have some special abilities, but they won't necessarily use sophisticated spells, whereas more intelligent monsters will have access to spells due to their higher POW and int and so forth. And then, of course, you'll need to think about their vulnerabilities, whether they have armor, which could be because they're transdimensional creatures, or they have particularly tough scales on their body or something like that. They might be immune entirely to mundane weapons. Maybe they can only be hurt by magic. There's several different levels that you can advance these monsters through in terms of their immunities, depending on how prepared your party is. And then there's some general discussion about size and characteristics. So again, they mentioned the human average size of 65. And we have a lovely diagram here, so we can see the Migo is slightly smaller than the human at size 50 to 55. The average human is size 65. A deep one is a bit bigger at size 80. And Byaki is 85 to 90 or so. When we get to twice human size, we're looking at elder things, formless spawns of Tsathoggua. Dark Young of Shub-Niggurath is about 3 times human size with a build of 5. Flying Polyps, build of 6 or even bigger. Then we get to 4 to 5 times human size, where we have monstrosities like the Chthonian, gigantic worms with size 260, and the great race of Yith in their original kind of conical form, which puts them at build 7, and they're an enormous cone-shaped being of size 320. The gigantic amorphous Shoggoth at size 420, build 9, and finally the Starspawn of Cthulhu at size 525, and these are 6 times or more the average human size. And this is far from the end of it. I mean, when we get to the deities volume, you'll see that some of the manifestations of gods can be significantly scarier than that. Then there's also nice tables here. So if you want to randomly generate a monster, you can use these tables here. So it gives you everything you need to generate a random threat. The scale, how big it is, the speed, intelligence, power, and spellcasting abilities, number of attacks per round, armor and immunities, rates of healing or regeneration, the general goal of the monster, is it just bloodlust, does it want to get home, does it serve a Mythos deity, etc. How many special abilities does it have? From none to 3, whether or not there's a cost per special ability, and that you can assign a certain number of magic points per use, and then there's special abilities with costs on this D10 table here as well, which includes things like mind control, teleportation, the touch that withers flesh, can become invisible, etc. So that's a quick and easy way to generate a monster if you just want something to mix things up a little bit. They also talk here about, basically, in older editions of the game, there were kind of classifications of monsters. Monsters, some species were associated with great old ones or outer gods. Some were classed as independent races that have their own agendas, and some are just kind of out there doing God knows what. So they've helpfully kind of adhered to that system here, but they make the point to say that, don't feel bound by this. Depending on who you read, there will be different ideas about, the motivations of these creatures and what their possible alliances may be. Then we get into the entries themselves. So first we start out with a description, possible other names, and of course the keeper is encouraged to come up with unique ones just to keep adding to the mystery. And then in the main entry you have your notes about their habitat, goals, and all that kind of stuff. Then their power, special abilities, then their characteristics, hit points, their build, which is, of course, the scale of the monster. And some monsters are positively enormous, so they give the example of a dole, which has an average size of 2775. So it's nearly 31 times the size of the largest human, which is pretty crazy. And then you have the damage bonus, of course. So if you have a notation of plus DB, then the damage bonus should be included in the attack damage. If it's just DB, then you just use the damage bonus as the base damage for the attack. You have the monster's movement and a combat section listing their attacks per round, the forms these attacks can take, and any combat skills values that they need. Weapons listed are usually going to be natural weapons as opposed to like artifacts or whatever else. And if an entity has a 100% in an attack, it means it never misses unless you get a 100. Because that's always a miss. And notes that many creatures of the Mythos inflict special damage, so there could be draining your stats, suffocating, drowning, burning, electrocution, hypnosis, poisoning, or even transforming or swallowing somebody. The text of each entry will describe the special effects and what effect those have mechanically. Then we have the number of attacks per round, and it may be specified by attack form, so, one claw attack, 2 tentacle attacks, or whatever. Then we have damage and loss of characteristics, which is another possible outcome of attacks. And then some key skills will be noted, so the keeper will determine the value for any unlisted skills. A rule of thumb is that an average skill is between 40 and 50%, but the entity could, for example, have higher values if it's appropriate. Perhaps a spawn of something related to Atlaknaka, the spider god, would have a very high climb skill, for example. So you can use logic to kind of cover that sort of thing. And also they give you a handy table of how to damage monsters by extremist weapons. So dousing them with fire, chemical weapons, biological weapons, bombs, or nuclear attack, and the possible effects of these depending on the amount of material being used and how much of the monster is covered by it. One thing to note, and then you'll see that in the deities book, is that some monsters or some creatures or deities may well be destroyed by, say, a nuclear attack, but they're only sort of temporarily discorporated, and they will reform over time. These are gods. These are not normal beings, right? They will run away, lick their wounds, and come back, and some, like Azathoth, will just reform surprisingly quickly and damage an enormous amount of wherever you are. So after the key skills, you'll have armor as well, and then a list of any immunities and vulnerabilities. So, as I mentioned before, some monsters are immune to mundane weapons, some will be immune to certain elements, some will be immune to specific kinds of damage. Vulnerabilities are usually not listed unless, there's a particular type of damage that would do sensibly some kind of extra harm, like dousing a fire vampire in water or something like that. Then they leave that up to the keeper to use their logic and knowledge for that. Then there'll be a list of any potential spellcasting abilities, including, die roll or specific number for how many spells the creature knows. And then you may be directed to certain specific spells that tend to be used by that creature as well. So, for example, a deep one is more likely to cast Contact Cthulhu than summon Bind Fire Vampire, which would make much sense because they're water-based creatures. But Cthulhu is, of course, deep under the sea, and they feel more connected to that. Then, of course, we have the sanity loss. These can get very, very large and scary with very, very large and scary monsters. And with that, we get into the Mythos monsters first, starting with the spawn of Abhoth. Everything is listed alphabetically. You'll see that we do have, a lot of these little extra bits of info scattered about, which I like. So, for example, here we have a new resurrection spell variant to create an ashen one, which is a dust devil, which is an alternate name, which is described here. And we do have some really cool artwork scouted throughout. So this is a daughter of Alaknaka. They're a significantly larger than human-sized spider, and they can feast on your brain by first eating out your eyeballs. So I recommend killing them very, very quickly. Then we get into B. We have, of course, the classics like the Byaki, which will be known to most Cthulhu players or readers of the literature. The Chakota, I like this one. It's a kind of creepy, many-faced monstrosity, and yeah, it can cause quite a bit of sanity loss. See, if you lose your sanity roll, it can be a 1d20 sanity loss for this guy. I mean, there's just a staggering array of different sizes and types of monsters here, and even within each type, you get variants. So for the Chthonians, we have, young ones, we have 15-year-old ones, third instar, which is another stage of maturity, but we don't know exactly how old they are, and the fourth instar are the largest. They get up to size 200, for example. They get a much higher damage bonus, 4d6, and you can see that all of their stats, including their resistance to fire, go up as they gain size, as well as their armor and regeneration capacity. So that gives you sort of space to introduce a smaller scale Chthonian before you build up to a larger one. There are lots of ways to introduce these monsters without them being instantly total party kill. Then we've got cold ones, crawling ones, the classic color out of space, which of course has an aversion to light but can disintegrate things, which is often quite terrifying. It can manipulate objects by concentrating and solidifying a part of itself. When it attaches itself to a victim and it's feeding, then the victim must make an opposed POW roll, and if the color wins, it permanently drains 1d10 points each of strength, con, POW, dex, and appeal from the victim, as well as dealing 1d6 damage. So that's pretty bad. The victim will be aware of a sucking and burning sensation, and they'll progressively get more withered and gray until eventually they're essentially just a human-shaped pile of dust. So the color out of space is a bad one. Look out for those guys. Oh, and the crawling ones, wriggling masters of sorcery, they're really disgusting, kind of walking worms or gatherings of worms, and they know at least 1d10 spells, usually including dominate or other spells concerning the command of human will. Mundane weapons deal minimal damage, perhaps simply killing a few individual worms. Bullets cause only a single point of damage, except for shotgun pellets, which deal minimum damage. Fire, electrical, and toxic chemical-based attacks deal full damage. So this is a human-sized creature, but it's very, very hard to kill and very strong with sorcery. So again, there's a monster here for every occasion. Different sizes, different combinations of characteristics. Here we have one of my personal favorites, the Star Spawn of Cthulhu. They are gigantic at size 525. Their damage bonus is plus 10d6, 7d8 hit points. They've got 4 attacks per round, a claw, tentacle, and body slam. Their fighting is 80%, and they do 10d6 damage, their damage bonus with that. Plus they get 10 points of hide and blubber ammo, and they regenerate 3 hit points per round. They also know 3d6 spells, possibly Contact Cthulhu, Create Mist of Roye, Grasp of Cthulhu, and Send Dream. And you lose 1d20 points of sanity if you lose your sanity roll. And it gives some great details about these. So they also have the capability of dream sending, so they can really disturb the minds and dreams of those who are nearby, and it may attempt to use those to influence people to get what it wants. And there are fevered dreams recorded in certain tomes of 5 elite star spawn who slumber in hidden places around the globe, which sounds like a great adventure hook to me. But dealing with those would not be easy. Then we have Thralls of Cthulhu, who are servants of the god, and they are pretty disgusting as well, as you can see. We have the Dark Crawler, which are nightmarish lamprey-like worms, seeking out mines from which to draw sustenance. So they siphon energy out of sentient beings. We got a classic deep one. There's some info about the oaths they take to the Esoteric Order of Dagon. And then, of course, their combat details. And then we have the Shoggoth Tuusha, a deep one variant. So they have the power to command Shoggoths. Each half hour, they must defeat the Shoggoth in an opposed POW roll. Once controlled, the Shoggoth and its constituent pieces accept simple mental commands from the wielder. So if you want to have a really climactic deep one encounter, then throw one of these guys out and have them chucking Shoggoths around, and that'll make things serious real quick. Then we have hybrid deep ones, and there's a few examples of those. There's a Blessed of Cthulhu, there's a Dolphin hybrid, there's a Shark hybrid. They have only basic physical skills. Monstrous hybrids with a power of 70 or more may know 1d4 spells. Usually those concerned with deep ones, Cthulhu, Dagon, Hydra, and matters relating to the oceans. Yeah, they cause varying amounts of sanity loss. Particularly the truly monstrous beloved of Cthulhu are the most scary of the 3. Then we have Desh, Devil Creepers, which are enormous as well. The monstrous version is size 500. so nearly as gigantic as the Star Spawn of Cthulhu. They can attack 1d4 times per round or 2d4 times per round if they're monstrous. Asterisks here indicate the monstrous version. They can grab, after which they basically each additional successful maneuver adds to the number of constricting vines. You can try to damage the vine by applying 4 hit points of damage to it, although the held person suffers a penalty die to their attacks. If more than 2 vines hold them, 2 penalty dice are applied. Alternatively, you can attempt a strength or dex roll opposed by the Devil Creeper's strength, which by the way is 150 if they're monstrous, to break free. Once held, the target may be strangled or squeezed to death or bitten with an automatic 1d6 damage per turn, so no roll to hit required. So be careful. Then we have the gigantic doles. Here we see the size, 3025. As mentioned earlier, they can engulf an enormously huge area, which is the size of its goo attack. So it spits a slimy goo from its mouth up to a range of 2 to 3 miles or 3 to 5 kilometers. Covers a circular area with a diameter equal to 1% of the monster's size in feet. So a dole of size 2750 spits a glob 8 meters across, or 27 feet, big enough to bring down an airplane. So that means that monster could also swallow an entire area 8 meters across. So the keeper will then determine if the swallowed investigators are already dead or can somehow try to escape from within the dole. Then we have the famous dimensional shamblers, which are really annoying because they can grab onto you and then just disappear to another dimension. But there's some nice tips here about using them effectively. I think it's all too tempting for keepers to be mean and say, oh, well, you know, the shambler took you to a horrible death dimension and there's no oxygen and now you're dead. But that's not very interesting. It'd be more interesting if you take them to some otherworldly prison or someplace else on Earth or an alien facility on another planet where conceivably you could be tracked down and saved, or you might be able to find information and somehow get it out of that place and back to your party. You know, give an opportunity for that player to still participate in the game. Don't just let them get grabbed and sort of shoved into a corner and say, give me a new character sheet. You know, the ability to transfer and teleport across dimensions is an interesting one, so might as well make the most of it. And then we have some more classics like the Elder Thing, which you know from At the Mountains of Madness. They have 5 attacks per round because of their many tentacles, and they can seize with a fighting maneuver, and each round thereafter the victim suffers crushing damage equal to half the Elder Thing's damage bonus, which is 3d6. So you just roll that and divide by 2. But his fighting skill is not that great, 40%, but they can roll 5 times, so bear that in mind. And they do have 7-point armor as well, and a 70% chance of knowing 1d4 spells. And then we have the Vicious Fire Vampire, which can mesmerize people, cause all kinds of combustion and terrible things. We have the Fisher from Outside, the Flying Polyps, which are one of the larger creatures at size 250. They can turn invisible. They have 2d6 tentacle attacks per round or 1 wind-based attack. And the Wind Blast emanates from the polyp and deals damage equal to the damage bonus, which is 5d6, so that's significant. And the blast can extend further, costing 1 magic point per additional 20 yards or meters, but loses 1d6 damage for each multiple of the base range. They can also use a Fixing Blast, has a maximum range of 1,000 yards or meters, and can blow without diminishment around corners or through winding corridors. It has a peculiar sucking effect on the target, slowing them down and forcing the target to make an opposed strength roll versus the polyp's POW. If the polyp wins, the victim cannot move away that round. So they can both blow you away with a blast of deadly force, or they can suck you in place, basically, and force you to stand still. And it can also generate a windstorm together with other polyps, which can generate hurricane force winds over an area of a few square miles. That can do a huge amount of damage to a very wide area. Then we got the lovely Formless Spawn, we can see here, also known as the Black Slime, Fluid ones, the Icarus, or Icarus, I'm not sure how you pronounce that, to be honest. They're shape-shifting and gooey and disgusting, but they can still grab you. Now we've got some repulsive undead things. We've got ghasts and ghouls. There's some info here about ghoul cults. So there are some human groups that offer their members access to special banquets where they can partake of forbidden foods, which are mainly cannibal in nature. So for some humans, the eating of a corpse flesh is the spark that sets them upon the road of transformation into a ghoul. And that's ultimately the goal for some of these. We have Servants of Glaki. We have the Nofke, this crazy thing, like a 4-armed polar bear of death. And it's about twice as tall as a human as well, and it can generate intense cold around his body, which is not great, and it can summon a blizzard to conceal itself and to basically do huge amounts of damage, so be careful of that. And conveniently, nearby they have a hypothermia table, so as your body temperature drops due to the Ice Fiend's Nofke, then you can refer to this to see the effects of the severity of the hypothermia, the con roll required to overcome it, and the possible effects and the damage taken per hour. Then we have Ghostwood Gnomes, which are deceptively adorable, very tiny, and they're enchanted servants. They have 9-point stone hide and 3-point armor against blunt weapons. It's quite cool. And we have Satyrs, who are servants and priests of Shub-Niggurath. They look like the satyrs of classic legend, but much more evil. We have larvae of the Great Old Ones. And these are quite interesting. So these are frightful bulbous sacs from which erupt claws, crooked-tipped wings or tentacles. These wet and steaming eggs are like some isolated internal organ able to convey itself about and treat with the world around it. When birthed free of the sac-like egg, the larvae are monstrous to behold, giving vision to the things they will one day grow to become. So these are kind of undeveloped, immature things that may grow up into full-fledged Great Old Ones. And as such, they have a huge amount of terrible powers. They have an aura of pain surrounding them. They might have a maddening influence that gives continuous, horrible sanity damage. Not good. And 1d6 plus 1 attacks per round as well, which could vary. It could be claws, bites, tentacle crushes, horrible sounds. Every larva is unique. They recommend that you determine its attacks and form appropriately. And it will know 1d6 spells as well, as determined by the keeper. Then we have the doe spawn. So this is a larval horror. It's also one possible manifestation of the larval form of a Great Old One. So it's kind of a variant of the larvae that we just looked through there before. So this is one possible kind of fully sketched out version of a larval horror that you could use. They got 1d6 tentacle swipes or rips per round, 1 tentacle implant. It also likes to use absorbed slaves or puppets, using their bodies to initiate attacks and so forth. It can rip into opponents or once per round attempt to absorb a new slave. So it absorbs the memories of beings it controls by implanting an invisible tentacle within the brainstem of a victim, and winning an opposed power roll, it can control said person. So yeah, be careful. Then we have the spawn of Hastur. That's a very unsettling image there. Almost looks like some of the stuff you get with AI generation, but this is of course generated by a human. Chaosium has promised not to use AI generation, which I think is great. Artists should be paid for their creativity. But yeah, these guys are also pretty unspeakable. We have the Hell Leech. We've got the Hunting Horror, not to be confused with the Night Gaunts, who are similar but not the same. And they're both covered in this book, of course. We have the spawn of Ithaqua, the Wendigo. They are the ice blessed. They can alter the weather, creating different cloud cover levels, wind speed levels, temperature levels. Referring you back to the hypothermia box again. They can generate precipitation ranging from dry to heavy rain or thunderstorms and blizzards. Yeah, and they are enormous at size 325 in monstrous form, and they have 4 attacks as well. Then we have Courtiers of the King in Yellow. So they have a Dance of Death, mesmerizing and damaging those bearing witness. Mesmerizing attacks are always troublesome, and the King in Yellow loves that sort of stuff. So watch out when you're dealing with those kind of adventures. People of Kunyan. If you want to know more about them, I don't want to say too much because there's a nice Pulp Cthulhu adventure path about those. Then we got some Dreamland stuff as well, so the Ghoul Hounds of Lang. So they are believed to come from the hidden plateau of Lang where numerous realities are said to coexist. The cry of a Ghoul Hound is so bone-chilling that those hearing it must make a sanity roll. Each night while pursuing its prey, a Ghoul Hound will call out its death cry. They also have a death stare. So if they stare into your eyes, they transfix the unfortunate person to the spot if they lose an opposed power roll versus the hound. During that moment, the target comprehends the reason why they're being hunted down, perhaps seeing a vision of what they did to bring the hound's attention. Such clarity provokes a sanity roll for 1/1d6. The target remains transfixed and unable to move until the Ghoul Hound launches its first attack, breaking the spell and allowing the target to act thereafter. So that's pretty scary. These guys are inhabitants of Lgiix, multi-limbed metal aliens. They also have some interesting weaponry that includes special whips and knives. They can cut through metal as easily as through soft flesh. And the whip releases an electrical charge on contact, plus they have a ray of energy, a base range of 20 meters, that delivers 1d6 plus 2 damage. If you get hit by it, you must attempt a con roll or fall unconscious for 1d3 rounds straight away. Then we have the Loigor, got the Lurkers. The Migo, they do a great job with them here as well. So there's speculation of why they do what they do, which is mainly taking people's brains out and putting them in cylinders and doing weird experiments, the weird ways in which they die, how they can move through space and fly through the interstellar space without any protection. Some speculate that they're pan-dimensional beings, and that's why they don't show up in photographs and stuff like that. And then they give you some variants as well. They're a kind of hive society. So you have Soldier Migo, you have Scientist Migo, that'll be more, likely to know spells, and Spy Migo. So it gives you the varying chances to know spells there as well. The Spy Migo will have Listen 60%, Spot Hidden 60%, and Stealth 70%. So be careful of those. And of course, they can all give you a sanity loss. And here's some examples of Migo variants in a very cool piece of art there. here. Enigmatic aliens from beyond. So we got their general stats here. And then we have the million favored ones, as well as a sidebar on the Migo mist projector. So the mist looks like a thick white fog and is intensely cold. Deals 1d10 points of damage per round, less 1 point if the targets are dressed in warm clothing, or 3 points for thick Arctic clothing. The weapon's projection can be sustained. The Migo mist can go over a target for several rounds, ensuring the death of unprotected humans. So look out for that. They have lots of very difficult to face technology. And we've got swamp lurkers, we've got mine parasites, the famous night gaunt, who are faceless nightmares, described very effectively in one of Lovecraft's stories. We have this thing, the Neoth Korgai, something like a black-orange colored octopus, a bundle of fungoid-like creepers all gathered and joined at one end to a body sac, which is a pulsating mass of glistening flesh, within which is a circular-shaped mouth. So that's pretty gross. They are vampiric nasties who can drain life. They can possess intelligent life forms, and the control is absolute. And they can control you as long as they remain within 20 miles or 32 kilometers of where you are. An extreme power roll by a possessed person may give them a clue toward their being controlled by an alien mind. So, wow, they're really, really good at dominating people. And if you get all of your power drained and die, then you become vampiric zombies 2 hours after death. And there's some rules about what that looks like and what happens to you afterwards. We have Spawn of Nyogtha, looking a bit sort of diseased and pustule and Nurgle-ish in this one. For those of you who like 40k out there, they're human-seeming spawn that can hide their origin for some time, but once the final transformation takes hold, the spawn is liable to leave a disgusting slime wherever it has stepped. It's also photosensitive. Then we have larvae of the outer gods. These are among the beings that dance blindly and idiotically in the court of Azathoth at the center of space and time. Occasionally, portions of these beings are torn off or ejected into the depths of space, and sometimes become living beings unto themselves, monstrous larvae of the outer gods. Whether they grow into full outer gods over time is conjectural. They are powerful entities nonetheless. And in fact, there's probably an infinite number of larvae, and each is unique. Although no two larvae may share the same parent entity, they need bear no resemblance to each other or their sire. They're cast off from entities at the center of the universe. They can drift forever in interstellar space, never encountering a planet. Others may land, willingly or not, on distant planets and stars, where they may lie dormant for millennia or grow to plague, conquer, or mindlessly destroy their new home world. They can be of any form: insectoid, metal, liquid, gaseous, crystalline, living machine, geometrical, amorphous, phosphorus, etc. And then they give you a bunch of examples. A mass of connected green-black pyramidal shapes, a living sentient machine, and a scuttling, dripping mass of tentacles, and then some basic stats here. Then we have the servitors of the outer gods. So they may be found accompanying Mythos deities, though they're most commonly found in Azathoth courts. These are the demon flautists playing flute-like music for their masters. The noise is best described as a sort of background dirge rising to a maddening cacophony of piping. So the idea is that this is supposed to keep Azathoth from going crazy and destroying everything. But the music is very discordant, and every 2 rounds, while you're exposed to it, you have to make a sanity roll, potentially lose 1d4 sanity on a loss. And they're also quite powerful. They have 18 hit points, 1d6 damage bonus, 4 attacks per round. They can grab you with their tentacles, and they know 1d10 spells, usually including several summon, bind, and call spells. Yeah, so not great. Then we have some smaller guys, the rat things, reanimates, sand dwellers, serpent people, again, who have some excellent campaigns about them, so I won't talk too much about them. We have the Shagai, human hybrids of, and then we have the insects from Shagai themselves, also known as the Shan. They're paradimensional insectoid beings, and generally bad news. They have mental attacks inside the human brain. They're parasitic and not wholly material. So they're quite small, and they can fly directly into your brain using 1 magic point. And once they're inside, they can do some really terrible stuff. Note their size is only 5. So small, but not great to encounter nonetheless. The Shantax, there is a short campaign for 6th edition Cthulhu based on the Shantax as well. Do look into that. They fly through the vacuum of space, sometimes bound by wizards and servants of the outer gods as steeds. We have the Shoggoths, with a fantastic full pager, because they're such an iconic monster here. So we've got what looks like a regular Shoggoth and a Shoggoth Lord in front. So the Shoggoths are fairly mindless. They can mimic the sounds they hear, which is creepy, and they can engulf things, which is disgusting. The Shoggoth Lords, they are smaller, more intelligent descendants of the Shoggoths, and they can freely transmute between their human and monstrous forms. And so they have 2 sets of stats here reflecting that. And they even give you a nicely statted out notable Shoggoth Lord called Mr. Albert Shiny. So he's got a whole backstory. He's got his stats for human form and true form, combat abilities, all his various skills. If you want to have a Shoggoth Lord with a personality in your campaign, they've got one for you, which is great. Then we have the Proto-Shoggoths, Children of Shub-Niggurath, and the Dark Young, one of my favorite Cthulhu monsters, because they're like giant walking, pulsating, suppurating trees. And there's also a new form of them called the Dark Sargassum. They're exceptionally large, but they're also really, really rare, and they only appear underwater, but they're both listed here. So you can see the Stomping Horrors, the Dark Young of Shub-Niggurath on the ground, are at size 220. The Dark Sargassum at size 425. The ground-based ones, they will use tentacle grabs, and they can grab up to 4 targets at a time, and then drain you of your strength stat, which cannot be restored. Basically, a rule of thumb in Cthulhu is that if a monster drains a stat, it stays drained. You can't really get it back unless there's a specific remedy listed in the creature description. And they can also trample up to 1d4 humans if you're close together, so look out for that. It does 2d6 plus 4d6 damage, so significant. We've got Space Eaters, Spectral Hunters, Star Vampires, another famous Cthulhuid entity, and they are bestial and ravenous, yet they remain frequently invisible, but they are visible when they are feeding, so watch out for the blood coursing through their bodies as they feed. And they're called Star Raveners, which is a great name for them. We have the Swine Folk, Magic Leeches, the Chocho worship Ubosathla, who's in the other book. Mythos is aware Chocho have an affinity with the Black Lotus, able to derive powerful drugs from this plant. Some examples here, including a sleep drug, a poison, a dream drug, and incense, which produces the same effect as the dream drug, but is not addictive. We've got Terrors from Beyond, so this is kind of a general category for creatures that exist in sort of right-angle realities to our own. They're also known as astral parasites or dimensional swimmers. Here they're called astral hunters as well. The Hounds of Tindalos, another classic monster. They will travel through angles, so avoiding them means that you need to avoid any sharp corner of 120 degrees or less. When it manifests, it first appears as a black smoke pouring from the corner, from which the head and then the thing's body emerges. And once a human has become known to one of these creatures, it will follow you through space and time. The hunt may take a matter of days to many years. Generally, if you are doing time travel or jumping across space, you may attract the attention of a Hound of Tindalos. And that's generally a very bad thing. And then there are Lords of Tindalos, which are creatures of otherworldly material instead of solid flesh. And there's a general set of Tindalosian powers, by the way, which is pretty cool. One of them is their step-through ability. As long as sharp angles are within 5 yards, they can jump through hyperspace to another angle anywhere in the current space-time it's in. They have hypersight, so they can see through all directions, behind walls, in containers, all at once. But they can't see past magically protected areas or beyond curves or spherical places. They also have a horrible odor. So if you're within 10 yards, you have to succeed with a con roll or be incapacitated by vomiting for 1d6 rounds. And they also twist space around themselves, which can provoke a sanity roll, which is not so great. The Lords of Tindalos are the masters of angular time. They can utilize any and all of the Tindalosian powers, and they're very large, with a big damage bonus. Yet they're covered with the bluish pus that we get from the hounds as well. They can swallow whole anything up to size 500. Which is pretty crazy. Those swallowed have 1d10 plus 6 rounds to escape before they are disintegrated and die. Breaking free requires the use of spells or an enchanted weapon, causing a minimum of 12 damage cumulative. And of course, you suffer damage to your hit points and the loss of stats for each round you spend in the belly of the beast. Then there's Tindalosian hybrids as well. So, they've really dug deep for this book and found all the weird stuff, all the variants from different adventures. Loads of cool stuff alongside the classics. We've got the Windwalkers, also known as the Children of Ithaqua, the Worm That Walks, who are life force predators. They have the ability to take on the illusory appearance of a specific person, somebody within 10 feet. And they have psychic dominance as well, which is always scary. And once a worm has completely consumed a victim, having eaten all their magic and hit points, it may take on the appearance of that victim for days at a time, costing 2 magic points per day. The illusion is instantaneous, and the worm can take on the likeness of anyone it has completely consumed. So the more people it eats, the more difficult it is to catch. So watch out for that. We've got Worms of the Earth, and some increasingly unpronounceable things. Shotlimigo, I don't know what that is. Denizens of Yadith. They have some advanced alien weaponry. We have the Children of Yig, and Servants of Igolanak. Spawn of Yig, who is blessed of the snake god, of course. Then we have the Great Race of Yith, who, like the Migo, get a nice detailed discussion of who they are and what they do, and their key abilities like time travel, mind transfer, and they do have a human cult that aids them. In exchange for their assistance, the visitors share technological or magical knowledge. Over time, the human agents have been directed by the Great Race to form lines of communication, and in the 20th century, a network or cult of human agents devoted to the Yithian minds is in operation. So there you go. And here's a lovely full pager of the Yithian himself. Really, just a generally unattractive thing. I have to say. And they're enormous at size 320, as we saw in the size chart before. And they often use a lightning gun, which has a pack of 32 charges and takes 1 round to reload. And each charge deals 1d10 damage. You can use multiple charges at once, however. So if you use 3 charges, for example, that'd be 3d10 damage, which is instant death for any human, pretty much, unless you're very lucky with the rolls. There's also a lightning gun Model C, which can be used by 2 human hands, but you have to figure out how to use it without destroying yourself first. Then we have Children of Yog-Sothoth. You can see one here bursting out of a barn, so you can tell they're significantly large. So some mantra spawn are invisible. It can only be seen through magic or the use of the powder Ibn Ghazi or similar thing. And they are also enormous at size 220. Some of them, it's noted, are invisible. Most of them can grab and crush or suck blood from a target. Then we have the Yug, the ocean lurkers, which are really gross looking. And now we have a move over to monsters from folklore. So we have the Black Dog, legend known particularly in the United Kingdom. So if you gaze into their glowing eyes, you become frozen with fear. Can't take action for 1d3 rounds. We have corpse lights, we have ghosts, various different methods of how they might attack or use the environment. We have golems, we have horses of the invisible, a race of partially material creatures from another plane of existence. We have the Jersey Devil, a hooved flying bipedal creature said to inhabit the Pine Barrens of southern New Jersey. Pretty cool. The Lake Monster, man-eating plants, reminds me of the Little Shop of Horrors. The Megalodon, so the ancient giant shark. Of course, we've got mummies, giant hairy hominids, so this is the Sasquatch, basically, or the Bigfoot. We've got animated scarecrows, which could be animated by spells or demon possession or all kinds of things. Similarly, we can have animated skeletons, vampires, and it gives you a few options for which vampire legends could prove to be true or not, and they're called blood-sucking freaks. But yeah, we will talk about Night's Black Agents at some point this month, by the way, which is a great game if you like hunting vampires. And there's a huge variety of vampires in that game as well. Then we got werewolves and zombies, and then we move into the realm of normal beasts, which are still quite dangerous. You know, if you get attacked by a crocodile, it's not going to be fun. They can grab you and thrash, which will be damage 1d6 plus being held, and then you'll be dragged underwater and violently shaken, breaking bones and ripping flesh, so 2d6 damage per round. So, not great. You can have large bat swarms, black bears, grizzly bears, and polar bears. Polar bears, of course, being the largest, the most dangerous. And they have the greatest amount of armor, which is 6-point fur and gristle. Having encountered polar bears in the wild myself, I would say they are definitely something you should avoid. Don't worry, I was fully prepared, and we did scare them away with flares, but we encountered several, and they came very close. This was in Svalbard, which is a small territory up near the North Pole, administered by Norway, by the way. Then we got some big cats, bobcats, lions, tigers, etc., some dogs, ranging from dogs, jackals, wolves, and hyenas. We've got elephants, eels, gorillas, ordinary cats, which seems weird, but Lovecraft loved cats, so seems appropriate. Hippos, which are the classic animal that everybody thinks are harmless, but they kill tons of tourists a year in Africa. We have horses, mules, donkeys, piranhas, various types of sharks, scorpions, including some varieties, and the effects of their poison, and the damage done by the poison. Scorpion poison is quite nasty, by the way. Then we have various types of snakes as well, and a huge list of venomous snakes, along with their characteristics. You know, are they aggressive? Are they an ambush predator? Their venom toxicity, the time it takes for the toxin to spread, and the effects of the toxin. And then we have the venomous spider. Again, we have a huge variety of those. The brown recluse and the funnel web are particularly nasty, as well as the black widow, of course. And the giant squid, my favorite real-life monster. They get some stats in here as well. Then we get some wild boars. Pronunciation guide, which I probably should have looked at before doing this video, but never mind. And there we are. So that's book 1. Book 2, I'm going to skim through a bit more quickly, because the Mythos gods, to me, are kind of, you know, they should be one of the more mysterious parts of the setting. What I really want to highlight in this volume is the fantastic job that they've done in making the gods feel more dangerous and unknowable than they did in the previous version of the Malleus Monstrorum. They mention, of course, that they owe a terrible debt to the compiler of the first edition of the Malleus Monstrorum, but they've revised, tweaked, and updated everything since then. And they talk about the different classifications. So we've got great old ones, lesser old ones, outer gods, avatars, elder gods, and unique beings, with a little description of each of those. Both great old ones and outer gods may produce avatars, which are kind of portions of their greater self distilled into distinct and self-aware manifestations. Then we have unique beings which are not quite gods, but almost fall into that category. While it's not used in this book, there is a term Great Ones that is used to describe gods of the dreamlands, and or those who may have some close and specific association with Earth itself. So these are earthly gods that have retreated or transitioned to the dreamlands. Perhaps they are just now mere memories of once proper human deities, like, from the Norse pantheon or the Greeks or what have you. Then there's some talk about what happens when your mind is open to the mythos. The answer, nothing good. Using mythos gods in games. This is something to be careful with because you have to be inventive. I mean, if you have a manifestation of a mythos god, you can potentially be rolling 1d100 sanity loss for some of these. And that could just end your game immediately. These, of course, are great creatures that are essentially unkillable long term. You can be creative and discorporate them, as in the story Call of Cthulhu, where a ramming boat caused Cthulhu to turn into mist and run away. But in general, mythos gods are really not that concerned about humans unless you start actively trying to piss it off. So you may be able to just watch in horror as it does crazy things, and it won't necessarily mess with you. But using magic to either get away or banish it is probably a good way to go for a lot of these things. You don't want to get involved into any kind of physical confrontation. And of course, there's some ideas for developing your own mythos deities, which would include, what does it do? What does it want? What kind of cults worship it? Does it have a physical body? Can it produce avatars? How scary is it? Do cultists gain any bonuses or gifts from being associated with it? And what I particularly love in this edition is we have this concept of the aura. So when in the presence of a mythos god, your perception of reality can be altered. So the aura section will talk about particular aspects like colors, smells, vision, sounds that might be used to describe the atmosphere that surrounds the entity. So that really helps to build up the sense that something really awful is nearby. And, smart players will encounter that aura and hopefully be drawn away, but you never know. Each entry for the god, we see a description of what they look like in if they have a manifestation, whether they have a cult or not. So Abath has no organized human worshippers, but some who have touched it or encountered it may become obsessed, and you can get some blessings like artistic obsession or manipulation of life. So you can give strange life to a creation of clay, wood, metal, and so on. And for each god, they give you a typical manifestation. So if it was to generate enough power and could be bothered to show up on Earth, what would it be like? So in general, they have ridiculous numbers for everything. Dex is 5, so they can't move fast, but size 400, 90 hit points, can seize and then absorb the target on the following round, killing them instantly. Regenerates 20 hit points per round. These are not creatures that you need to be getting into combat with. And here for the aura of Abath, you have a sense of grime, filth, and foreboding that comes to mind in the presence of Abath and its spawn. A feeling that things are crawling over one's skin, and a general nausea that threatens vomiting. One feels unclean and somehow tainted. Very cool. And then the sanity loss, of course, is huge. 1d6 for a successful roll, 2d10 for an unsuccessful one. They have 250 POW and 50 magic points. And they have telepathy, able to communicate with its own spawn over any distance and with humans. So a lot of the gods have enormous amounts of power in that respect. They can communicate across vast distances of time and space, even across dimensions. And we have Afum-Za. There's a lot of gods that are, from obscure supplements and stuff that you could throw into a game just to keep people off balance. I think, some people think that, Call of Cthulhu, everybody knows Cthulhu, it's not a big deal. But there are a lot of great old ones and creatures in these books that I guarantee you, unless somebody is a real Lovecraftian scholar, they'll have no idea what it is. So dig deep and you will find something to surprise your players, or you can create something new pretty easily using the random tables and the great guidelines in both these books. Arwasa is a pretty cool one. So I think this actually turned up in one of the Laundry novels. I'm not entirely sure, Arwasa. No, it was a Delta Green adventure, I think. But yeah, it's a relatively lesser known god and not as terrifying as some of the others, but it can do a doom scream if you're a member of its cult. So you produce a terrifying scream that harms others 1d4 damage per round. It's pretty good for a scream. And the aura that it gives you is an instant revulsion and comprehension of wrongness, a strange sensation in the ears, although there's no sound, and a dull headache that grows in intensity. A perception of disquiet that makes hair stand up and goosebumps to form. And then we have Atlakanaka, the giant spider, dark and hairy spider-like thing with 8 legs and a toothsome mouth. Other names, the spider god, the great spinner, and the weaver. So this is a really interesting one to me because its web seems to reach across a vast array of the multiverse. I mean, it kind of crosses dimensions. Some parts of it may be in the Dreamlands. Some have used it to find an entrance to the Dreamlands or exit thereof. There are entrances to the web according to old testimonies, far beneath what is now modern Greenland and also below South America. So, I mean, it spins its web anywhere and everywhere. Physical manifestation, as you would expect, is pretty disquieting. It has the ability to drain paralyzed victims and sucks their bodily juices out at a rate of 3d10 strength points per round, with death occurring at 0 strength. So yeah, don't get bitten by a manifestation of Atlaknaka. There's no human cult dedicated to it, but some people do become obsessed with it, and they can gain spider-like blessings, like being able to climb up walls, spin web with your fingers, or have enhanced visual or physical senses. You can transform your body, getting multiple limbs or spider-like limbs instead of human ones. Or you could be blessed with hosting a brood of spiders within, able to send forth numerous spiders to act as spies. Ooh, that's really gross, actually. A person's skin crawls while in the presence of Atlaknaka, and the one is likely filled with dread and a terrible foreboding as they comprehend they are no more than food for this great creature. Very cool. Then we have Azathoth. So Azathoth is, of course, the mindless center of the universe and is believed to have existed since the beginning of the universe. And when it eventually wakes and is no longer lulled to sleep by the idiotic mad flautists that circle around it all the time with their discordant music, it will destroy the universe completely. When the entity does wake briefly from time to time, it usually wreaks horrible havoc somewhere in the universe. And its aura is quite something, so the sheer scale of Azathoth is enough to cause insanity in most. Its touch is shaded in despair and colored with madness. Even a person or thing somehow influenced by the entity conveys a soul-wrenching cold emptiness, where hope, love, and sense of self seem to melt away to nothingness. To recognize Azathoth is to realize one's own insignificance. So, yeah, that's bad news. Possible blessings of Azathoth cults. Your hands can become a channel of the deity, and when placed on a human, they burn in corrupt flesh. You could use your eyes instead of your hands to do the same thing, so you have a stare of doom, I guess. It could also give you an ability to teleport using magic points within about 1 mile, and a charred and blackened outline or shadow is scorched onto the ground on your exit and arrival. So encounters with Azathoth are random, nonsensical, and dark because it doesn't seem to have any graspable way of behavior. And here's a wonderful artist's impression of Azathoth writhing away at the center of the universe, shooting out these larvae into space to do their horrible business. So a typical manifestation of Azathoth is too massive to even really have numbers. There's kind of rough ideas here, but basically it says it's just not applicable. It has 1d6 attacks per round. It may strike anything within its vicinity with a tendril of negative energy. The damage is 1d100. A portion of Azathoth does the same, but at a lesser scale. If reduced to 0 hit points, Azathoth appears to implode and ceases to be, but then reforms 1d6 hours later. The god itself is beyond all possible scales and is meaningless to attempt combat with it. If you lose your sanity roll, you will lose 1d100 points of sanity. For even encountering a portion of it, it's 1d6/1d10 plus 2. It'll be accompanied by 1d10 servitors and 1d6 lesser outer gods who play nightmarish music designed to placate Azathoth. The appearance of its full form, if that were to be summoned by somebody, which I have seen happen a couple of times in adventures, destroys everything around it for a radius of 10d10 plus 10 miles. The range of destruction increases each hour that Azathoth remains, and is only held somewhat in check by the entity's coterie of otherworldly musicians. So yeah, it can reduce an entire city to ashes. So try not to manifest Azathoth if you can avoid it. Then we got some really obscure gods that I won't even attempt to pronounce. We've got Bast, Elder God, with the cat goddess, again reflecting Lovecraft's obsession with cats. And it can give you some cool blessings. Cat Whisperers, you can communicate with cats using feline helpers as spies, or call upon a gathering of cats to cause confusion or destruction to others. Or you can even transform into a cat for 5 or more magic points. Some may change into a hybrid human-cat-like beast with increased hit points, claw attacks, and so forth. So that's pretty cool. I think being a Bast cultist sounds less terrible than a lot of other options, to be honest. Sanity loss is just 0 or 1d6 sanity points. So it's definitely not considered so terrible as something like Azathoth or Beatis or Abhoth, these kind of things. Again, we see really creative aspects for every entry, different powers for the god itself, as well as its typical physical manifestations, blessings for their cultists. Some of these names you will recognize. I think a lot of people know of this one here, or Cthulhu. Of course, Cthulhu is the classic, and he gets a suitable large amount of space dedicated to him. Here we see the great Cthulhu himself, and here's a star spawn. In fact, a few of them shooting out. Just one of those is bad enough to be horrendous. And this is the, I believe, Leviathan form of Cthulhu as well. So, in touching idols of Cthulhu, one feels a greasy sense of falling and an uncanny coldness. Often handling such artifacts causes visions of R'lyeh and sometimes allows some connection to the mind of Cthulhu, inviting the entity's dreams to haunt one's own dreams. Coming face to face with Cthulhu while venturing through the undead city of R'lyeh will be a life-changing or ending experience. A truly alien being, Cthulhu radiates an otherworldliness that twists human perception and destroys minds. The smell of rotting seas and other indescribable things causes a person to vomit, sounds to become distorted, colors are unfamiliar, and one's mind finds it hard to relate to a thing so large, bizarre, and otherworldly. The sum total of this assault on the senses causes the human mind to sink in insignificance and seek oblivion. And then we have, of course, a typical physical manifestation of Cthulhu with size 1000, so much bigger than Starspawn, 160 hit points, 20d6 damage bonus, 2 attacks per round. It says, I love the British-style understatement, being somewhat large, Cthulhu may stomp and crush with its feet once per round, or scoop with its hands or face tentacles to then crush and devour. If it scoops up somebody as a maneuver, it can scoop up 1d3 investigators or other humans in its flabby claws or face tentacles to die hideously. Targets may attempt to dodge, and it can scoop once per round. It can also stomp, so those within 100 yards of Cthulhu must succeed with a dodge roll or be squashed flat for 20d6 damage. It can stop once per round. Its fighting skills for fighting, scoop, and stomp are all 100%. So, yeah. Also, it has 21-point transdimensional armor, regenerates 6 hit points per round, and if it's reduced to 0 hit points, it bursts and dissolves into a disgusting and cloying greenish cloud of dust, yet reforms in 1d10 hours. So that gives you time to escape, and that's about it. There are a lot of Cthulhu cults. In fact, there's a great book about them, which I'll read some of that to you at a later date. And they can get some interesting blessings, including sprouting tentacles from the face or body for a cost in magic points, which grants them extra attacks, but also invokes a sanity roll. And they can also gain the ability to hear dreams, read the dreams of others for 2 magic points per target, and discern their meaning, possibly granting insights into what the target is thinking or will do next. So that's quite unfortunate if you're trying to infiltrate a Cthulhu cult. You must be aware that some of them may be looking into your head, into your dreams, and will see you coming without you even realizing it. Then we have the Great Cthulhu. Now he's able to reshape himself. So we have some variations here of Cthulhu as well. So Cthulhu Behemoth, suspected to be an avatar or some form of emanation of Great Cthulhu. It's seemed to be a luminescent fog or mist of blue, green, and or yellow coloration, and it only appears in the sea and never on land. There's some attacks here. It engulfs victims in its glowing fog. Anyone within the luminescent swirling mist is overcome by an icy, eerie feeling. Such individuals are automatically susceptible to Behemoth's mind influence and are unable to make a roll to resist. So that's pretty bad. The mind control is detailed up here. By expending 2 magic points, Behemoth may control a human. Thus, at maximum, 20 humans may be directly controlled at the same time. So if you are within the fog, you can't resist that, and you will just be under the control of Behemoth until they are bored with you. Then we have the Khorazin form. Appears to be another manifestation or of the will of dreaming Cthulhu, a psychic manifestation seen or heard through technology. So that's quite interesting as well, and that's pretty cool for modern era games to use that. A lot of investigators won't expect a manifestation of Cthulhu to appear incorporeally through their technology or through media. That's pretty awesome. And then there's Leviathan, which is believed by most to be connected to Great Cthulhu itself. It says bigger than any fish and more like a whale. It must have been over 50 feet from nose to tail. It rose up from the deep. Just for a moment I saw its head, a pointed snout with 2 deep-set beady eyes and a great maw of huge teeth that could swallow a man whole. And here we have a typical manifestation, size 700, plus 15d6 damage bonus. Can bite, swallow, or thrash twice per round, or 1 smash. The bite inflicts 6d6 damage, easily biting through boats, whales, and people. It can swallow anything size 210 or smaller in 1 bite. For any living creature, death is instantaneous, so no ambiguity there, no way of escape. If it bites and holds a target, it can trash the victim, causing hideous injuries. The initial bite delivers 6d6 damage, and on the following round deals 10d6 damage, ripping the victim or object into pieces. And it also smash to ram to a target, crash down onto a ship, etc. So Leviathan is also not to be messed with. Then we get into Cthulhu, another great old one. This one, I mean, how on earth do you pronounce that? I do not know. I would call it the Dark Hunger. It's much better. Or Seed of Azathoth. That's better. Yeah, and again, we have just enormous array of old ones, some of whom you will know, some of whom will be new to you. I mean, Cthulhu's The Hand of Fate. I hope it's not related to Manos, The Hands of Fate, the worst movie of all time. Dagon and Hydra, of course, the Sea Father and Deep Mother, as they're sometimes known. And Dowloth is a favorite of mine, Very interesting god. It's the render, known as the render of the veil. So it's an awesome complexity of globes, rods, and cylinders of crystal, metal, and fleshy rubber. No single form could describe it, as it moved and undulated, thrusting back and forth while in the very air and growing in size to fill the space in my head. These gray shapes converged and blended at its center, denouncing physical laws and casting mockery to my senses. Machine-like yet living, it saw me, it knew me. It lived within the physical angles and between them. So it's a bizarre geometric entity, seemingly composed of an ever-shifting conglomeration of geometric shapes, formed of a variety of materials or substances, which I think is just really cool. So it's this kind of mystical, geometric being. There's not a lot of human cults, but if there were, they would get some pretty cool blessings, like being able to use angles to move between locations, a bit like a Hound of Tyndalos, being able to predict likely future events in the next 24 hours or more and act accordingly, which would be amazing if you're trying to stop somebody infiltrating your cult, for example, or to confuse the mind, mentally imparts complex mathematical patterns, causing confusion in another person, who is distracted, taking a penalty die to all skill rolls for 1d4 plus 1 rounds, which is pretty awesome. The aura of Daoloth is a certain mystique and atmosphere of otherworldliness surrounds the entity and its followers. Cultist ceremonies tend to have the trappings of high magic and be well organized and planned affairs, as the risks to life and mind are so great. Any contact with Daoloth will be unnerving and ultimately bizarre, outlandish, and alien, as indicated by the sanity loss of 1d10/1d100. And that's just in the first round the god is visible. Every round thereafter, you automatically lose 1d10 sanity points while nearby. Plus, it has powers. It can allow the veils of reality to be lifted, allowing petitioners to see beyond their reality. Experiencing the lifting of veils provokes a sanity roll, 1d10/1d100, and the loss of 1d6 sanity points per day thereafter. Such daily loss continues until 0 sanity is reached, but may be negated by the person gouging their eyes out or calling on Daoloth to release them from the visions. How this may be accomplished is left to the keeper. Imagine that. So you're going to lose sanity in a huge chunk, and then 1d6 per day unless you gouge your own eyes out. Not fantastic. Then we have another avatar of Daoloth, the Sacred Light, and we have a physical manifestation of Daoloth, and the size increases every round. It starts at 200, but it keeps growing unless it's bound in some way. It does not use attack forms, but just engulfs anything around it, and anything that touches it just vanishes from this world and is transported to another place. If reduced to 0 hit points somehow, it implodes and reforms in 1d100 plus 500 days. You can also have Splinters of Daoloth, which would have a more manageable kind of approach to, getting a taste of Daoloth without an immediate eye-gouging, sanity-destroying horror, and a manifestation of the Sacred Light variation as well. You have the god Ahort, who is really, really gross. So you may be tasked with serving and protecting another human who carries the god's brood within them. That sounds really gross. You can be the brood carrier and carry your brood within yourselves. You can also command these miniature horrors, commanding them to exit their bodies so as to perform some task, which may be to gather information, enact violence, and so on, or you can cause mental confusion in others. Its aura is imposing confusion and doubt like a cancerous miasma, causing people to doubt their senses and second-guess themselves. It's known as the Master of the Labyrinth and can provoke up to 1d20 sanity loss. Gross, gross, gross. Then we have Katana no Thoa. There, I had a figure for him for the Cthulhu Wars board game, I think, at one point, but he looked very different from this. He also has a pretty serious physical manifestation at size 700, 1d4 attacks with plus 13d6 damage. Yeah, we have Gizguth, who is this gross-looking blob here, but at least the avatar is a little bit more dealable at size 230. Yep, then we have Glocky, who many of you will know, the Nofkes. They're more like kind of a cross somewhere between a great old one and a unique entity. Some people do worship them, and to those, the deity bestows great strength and speed, temporarily increasing strength by 4d10 points and move by 1d4 plus 1. You can also grant immunity from the cold, and truly blessed worshippers may find their bodies growing extra limbs, enabling them to perform additional attacks. Then we have Golgoroth, Groth-Golka, don't know that one. I've got Han, just Han, comes veiled in mist and with the howling of dogs, known as the Bringer of Madness, the Dark One, and Thing of the Mists. Alright. His typical encounter is not so huge, it's size 125, but it attacks by touching a target with its shadowy skeletal hand, causing 1d100 POW to be drained. Yikes. Should a victim's POW reach 0, their life force is drained away and they die, leaving behind a withered and brittle flesh husk with stark white hair. Those who survive emerge from Han's mist having aged 1d10 years per 5 points of POW lost. Such drained POW is of course lost forever. So, small but deadly. Small but mighty, I would say. Then we have Hastur, and Hastur has many forms. Of course, we have this classic sort of king in yellow type aspect. The physical manifestation is enormous. Con 1000, size 500. 1d3 random investigators or other humans are grabbed by the tentacles. They may be crushed for 13d6 damage or held for 1d4 rounds, and then released. 30-point transdimensional flesh armor. Incredible. You can have the Hastur Amber Elder avatar. You can have the Ravening One avatar. So many different forms. The King in Yellow, of course, Lord of Carcosa. And there's a typical example of the physical manifestation of the King in Yellow. Deceptively small, again, at size 70, but can vary up to 100. And yeah, it can latch onto a target and drain POW per round. Yeah, its robes are like razors and may slice and cut in a whirlwind like fury. There you go. Of course, we have the yellow sign. Don't look at it. Just avoid that. It's bad for you. We have Hypnos, the Lord of Sleep. We have... Don't know what that is. We have Idya, which is this thing. Size 340. Can swallow you. 10-point slimy and viscous flesh. Can grant you the power of cosmic wisdom, though. If you're able to look upon the stars, you may find their sight straying towards Zoth and unwittingly gain a glimpse of the cosmic truth embodied by Idya. Such sight may grant 1d10 plus 2 points of Cthulhu Mythos, while also provoking a sanity roll, 1d6/2d6 plus 2 loss. Wow, interesting. Okay. We have Ithaqua, one of the classic Great Old Ones, also known as the Howling God or the Great Windwalker. There's a great picture there. Really scary. Definitely not one to be messed with. Also very good to play if you play Cthulhu Wars, the board game. Huge sanity loss, of course, and to hear the howl on the north wind alone could cause you 1d6 sanity points by itself. It has 35 magic points, Call Lightning, Fury, Nullify Device, Possess Corpse, Send Dream, Temporal Rip, Wrath of Pazuzu, and others as desired by the keeper. Just whatever you want. Just whatever. It's a god, why not? The manifestation is size 500. It could appear smaller and then grow to monstrous size. It has claws and bites which ignore all mundane armor and deliver 4d6 damage, with a damage bonus of plus 8d6. Yeah, and it can do grabs and bite you, crush you, or fling you. So none of those are great. And then you have the Deathwalker avatar as well. Yeah, so when we have Lilith, a Great Old One, known as the Night Queen or the Queen of Lies. She can grant you the blessings of glamour to appear beautiful and beguiling to people of either sex. Can give you splendid dreams, ferrying your minds into either Earth's dreamlands or another bubble dreamscape. Often such dream visits are initially exciting, adventurous, and enticing, but eventually may be arduous tasks designed to provide Lilith with something. Two clear sides to her personality here, so be careful of that. We've got Umgulilok. Don't know about him. Lilith, not that big, but her attacks. She's got 6 limbs, each equipped with claw-like talons to slash or pierce, or may kiss or bite once per round, and that does 5d6 damage. In monstrous form, it has 10 points of flesh armor, cannot be harmed by mundane weapons during daylight hours. At other times, it may be harmed by mundane weapons. That's interesting. Reduced to 0 hit points, Lilith crumbles to dust and reforms in Dream in 2d8 days. Cool. Yep, then we have Mordigian, which is this thing. The Charnel One, or the Worm of Corruption, it's known. We have the Mother of Pus. That's truly disgusting. A lesser outer god composed of slime, tentacles, eyes, and mouths. Great. So I guess it's that one there. Size 150. And yeah, it can grab and engulf you in pus, I guess. That's really disgusting. Then we have Nodens, of course, familiar to players of Cthulhu Wars and other Lovecraftian games, most likely. And there he is. A little bit bigger than human size in his human form, but he does quite a bit of damage and prefers to summon night gaunts to deal with a threat, or using spells like Cloud Mind, Dominate, and so forth to distract or interfere. If facing a powerful foe, may use this dismissal power or simply remove itself from the situation. So Nodens is a smart one in combat, doesn't engage in conflict if it doesn't have an advantage, and prefers to use spells where possible. And there we can see he knows quite a lot of useful spells as well. And he has 100 magic points, which is a lot. Then we have Nyarlathotep. My god, terrifying. He again has many different forms. So human form, monstrous form. Human form is size 80, monstrous form size 450, which is quite a difference there. We have Nyarlathotep, the Crawling Chaos. For spells, again, of any the keeper desires, but none concerning Elder God and associated matters. So avatars of Nyarlathotep can animate the dead, can cause injury by touching the flesh of another, or can summon various Mythos monsters, 1 magic point per 5 POW points the monster possesses. Although may summon a Shantak, a hunting horror, or a servitor of the outer gods at the cost of a single magic point. Not good. Then we have many forms of Nyarlathotep, the Black Pharaoh, the Bloated Woman, the Green Man. All of these, of course, have stats and profiles. The Bloated Woman is super gross because it can kiss you, destroying the victim's int at a rate of 3d10 points per round. As long as the victim has int remaining, they can try to escape. When a victim's int is reduced to 0, their skull bursts open and the entity slurps out their living brains. Fabulous. Then we have the horned one, the queen in red, the skinless one, the TikTok man, a living machine, the faceless god, a gigantic sphinx with vulturine wings and the body of a hyena equipped with talons and claws. I'm telling you, there's some really weird stuff in here that your players will not be familiar with. And these are the monstrous avatars of Nyarlathotep, by the way. So if you're playing Masks of Nyarlathotep, you can use these guys to great effect. The Black Wind is pretty terrifying. The Bloody Tongue is really terrifying. It can attack targets within 35 feet. And the Face Tentacle does 10d6 damage just by itself. And it can summon a Shantak, Hunting Horror, or Servitor of the Outer Gods for a single magic point. So that is, yeah, again, not great. Then we have the Haunter of the Dark, someone resembling a giant bat, the Dweller in Darkness. We have the Kustia equation. So if you're trying to solve it, you will suffer 1d10 or 1d100 sanity loss. You can become obsessed with it, and then lots of bad things happen to you. If solved, the equation reveals itself as an enchantment to summon Nyarlathotep. At the moment of solution, the person who solved the equation hears haunting laughter and unearthly howling. The person's vision darkens momentarily, and they sense an alien mind beginning to oppose upon their own. Within moments, int has raised to 430 and pow to 500, while their body ripples and shifts as Nyarlathotep manifests a portion of its mind in their body, taking complete control. There is little that can be done to save someone who has solved the Crucia equation. Such individuals are alive in body only, their mind having been consumed by the crawling chaos. Killing the person dispels Nyarlathotep, who departs in the usual dramatic way by changing into some other form before leaving. Spells such as Cast Out Devil may force Nyarlathotep out of the host without destroying the body, but the person's mind is likely gone forever, permanently insane at the very least. There you go. So you get the idea. I mean, there's just a huge amount of gods listed here, many of which I have no idea about. I've not encountered them in scenarios before. And then there's a menagerie of lesser other gods. We have, who are these guys? Pharaoh, unique entities. Look at this weird little mushroom-headed guy. Plus we got the classics, Cthulhu, the 50 million forms of Nyarlathotep, and the King in Yellow, Hastur. And personally, there are pages where there aren't a lot of illustrations, but the ones that we have are fantastic. Shub-Niggurath is a proper outer god and is very enormous and scary, and the picture conveys that perfectly. I love the additional gameable details, the huge amount of background information, the information on the cults, the possible blessings for cultists, encounters. The aura stuff is great. It engages the senses, helps you describe to the players the wrongness of the situation. And I think it's a fantastic way of looking at the mythos gods. They can manifest, they can appear, but they warp reality around them in such a way that combat with them is a laughable idea. There's this saying that you shouldn't stat out gods in games because players will find ways to kill them. And they probably will, Let them have that moment of feeling amazing before they realize that, it's a god, so it'll come back in a few hours or a few days or just whenever it wants. Who knows? So yeah. There's a lot of great stuff in here to bring into your games and to scare the bejesus out of your players. Tsathoggua is another classic one. You can see a lovely image of a carving of him here. He's another good faction to play in Cthulhu Wars, by the way. So he likes to swallow targets and crush them, regenerates 30 hit points per round. But it takes 1,000 years to reform if you kill it. That's a pretty long time. But for an immortal god, that's nothing, right? I mean, it's a heartbeat, relatively speaking. Then we have Ubosatla, that's the Cult of the Chocho. I think it's the Cult of the Chocho, isn't it? Not sure anymore, but I thought it was. Yeah, they have size 1,000, 200 hit points, 15d6 damage. Yeah, they can lash out, and the damage of its lashing varies randomly from 1d4 to 15d6. And the target can also be held, 1d6 touch damage, and then on the following round can be squeezed for 7d6, or pulled into its mass to be absorbed, 15d6 damage per round. Yikes. It regenerates 25 hit points per round. Impaling weapons deal minimum damage. That includes bullets, by the way. If reduced to 0 hit points, Ubosatla's mass turns into liquid and drains away. It reforms in 4D in 100 years. So, it can be rewarding to put some of these gods down if they do show up. But, good luck. You'd need to be pretty crazy already due to being stacked with spells and enchanted horrible bits to be able to stand a chance against these guys. But, having them manifest and scare the crap out of people in the game, or, grant blessings to their cultists, which then harry you for the rest of your days. There's loads of cool stuff you can do where the manifestation of the god is, a set piece moment that doesn't need to lead to combat, but just gives you a sense of the insignificance of the human condition in the Lovecraftian world. I think that's really what it's about. We have Yig, of course, the father of serpents, the god worshipped by the serpent men. Getting close to the end here. Yog-Sothoth, the opener of the way, also known as the key and the gate, the lurker at the threshold, etc., etc. So his manifestations are possibly the most terrifying to behold due to its abhorrent and otherworldly appearance, which is not only visual but conveys its alienness also through temperature, sound, and psychic vibrations. The ensuing sensory assault is often too much for humans, even for those with no sight to see. Bizarre, outlandish, iridescent, yawning, multitudinous, flowing, and festering are all good words to describe a manifestation, let alone terrifying, horrific, and fear-inducing. There you go. But you can get some great blessings from him. He can inform devoted cultists of future events. He can bestow rare and powerful items, such as a seeing glass to which other dimensions or periods of time may be viewed. He can give you cosmic knowledge. For each round spent witnessing such marvels, you get plus 1d10 points of Cthulhu Mythos. Unless forced to look away, a person may be unable to stop this rapid accumulation, requiring a power roll to stop oneself. At the keeper's discretion, those accumulating plus 30 points of Cthulhu Mythos in this fashion should thereafter attempt a sanity roll each week or become turned to the Mythos, forsaking previous concerns and affiliations to worship Yog-Sothoth. There you go. You can also be blessed with the knowledge to call forth and bind lesser Mythos entities. You might be able to resurrect people. Spell-wise, Yog-Sothoth may allow you to travel to other places in this universe and others, as well as traverse time. Usually such travel is one way, although it is not unknown for some devoted cultists to be gifted the knowledge of the gate spell. Very cool. And yeah, he always takes the form of this horrible, gooey series of blobs. Size varies from 0.5 to 2,000, okay? Average manifestation may be size 100 or 1,000, anywhere in between. It can summon monsters, 1 per round. It can use bolt attacks, 5 magic points per bolt. Those bolts knock aircraft out of the sky, sink ships, destroy buildings, and so on, and inflicts 5d10 damage on people. And if that person is dying, they're reduced to their essential salts, but they may still be brought back to life with the resurrection spell. It also sent forth a slimy sphere to touch one target. If not dodged, the target immediately suffers the permanent loss of 3d10 points of con and 2d10 points of ap, their flesh corrupting and withering. If con reaches 0, the victim is dead, again reduced down to their essential salts. Yog-Sothoth, one of the most famous for a reason. He's a bad dude. And then we end up with Zathog, no idea who that is. And Zar and Loigor, twin obscenities. Zoth-Amog, the deep dweller. Zoth-Sira and Yoth-Kala, masters of the abyss, or the ones below. And yeah, I think we're getting pretty close to the end here. Oops, sorry about that. And again, we have a pronunciation guide, which I really should have looked at before. And some nice monster sheets here to develop your own monsters, to develop minions, and of course an index to all the gods in this volume. So yeah, I mean, as you can probably tell, I think this volume is essential if you want to be a DM, or keeper rather, for Call of Cthulhu. The volumes are really beautiful. They've held up wonderfully. I've had them for years now. They have, an absolutely enormous range of cool stuff. And if somehow your characters... your players know every monster and deity in the Mythos, you'll probably still find stuff in here they don't know, honestly. And if you can't, you'll be able to make one up, and they give you rules for that. So there's really nothing to lose by buying this. You've got 150 monsters in Volume 1, dozens of gods and horrible stuff in Volume 2, a beautiful slipcase set, which is really solidly built, as you can see. So I highly recommend this for the aspiring keeper. If you're a player, it may be tempting to look at it, but I would advise that you let your keeper pick it up or buy it for them as a lovely gift, because this hobby is expensive for us keepers, by the way. So do chip in from time to time. Then they'll surprise you in play with some amazing, scary, and cool stuff. So if you are a Call of Cthulhu keeper, definitely pick this up. If you're a player, maybe you're looking for a Christmas gift for your keeper or something to make their lives easier and they don't have this, then definitely pick this up for them. I think it's well worth it. Yeah, so next time we'll probably look at Call of Cthulhu and the Grand Grimoire of Cthulhu Magic as well. Then I'll be taking a look at some other games, including Delta Green, Trail of Cthulhu, Night's Black Agents, and a personal favorite of mine, Eclipse Phase, the game of transhuman horror. So do look forward to that. Got lots of good stuff coming up this month for a month of horror. In the meantime, take care of yourselves as always. Stay well, and I hope to see you in the comment section below and in the next video. And if you don't mind subscribing on your way out, please do. And until then, see you soon. All right, take care, and bye-bye.